Raven was a contestant on season 3 of Netflix's dating show Love is Blind, where she, due to her behavior and standards, both on and after the show, emerged as a widely well-regarded queen, and for good reasons. So in this video, we are going to take a look at the mindset that creates the behaviors of someone like Raven to begin with. During the initial stage of the show, the pods, we see Raven making two significant connections, one with Bartise and one with SK. And while her connection with Bartise comes to an end, it is the connection that she makes with SK that ends up going somewhere. Because by the end of the first stage of the show, SK, as per the premise of the show, proposes to Raven without ever having seen her, and the two then get to meet each other for the first time and explore their connection together in the physical realm. They then slowly and steadily further build their connection and manage to stay undramatic from the beginning and quite far into the whole ideal. So it is when they get to meet the other couples for the first time that Raven's mindset gets really noteworthy. Because Raven's other connection, Bartise, who has proposed and is now engaged to Nancy, gets to see Raven for the first time and is immediately taken by her beauty. He then proceeds to pursue a conversation with Raven in which he persistently flatters her for her looks, which brings me to my first point about Raven's mindset, which is knowing that actions speak louder than words. I think probably most of us have heard this phrase many times before, but even though we may understand something on an intellectual level, it doesn't always mean that we fully get it to the bone. But with this principle, it really seems that Raven does, and understanding this makes her less susceptible to being swayed or flattered by words or compliments. Raven firmly and politely stops the interaction by not feeding Bartise's narrative. Instead of paying his compliment back, she consistently politely just thanks him for it and then shoots him down, telling him that they each made the right choice by being with the people they each chose. Actions speaking louder than words can look really straightforward, such as a man saying he'll text you tomorrow but then doesn't, or a man saying that he loves to buy a woman flowers but then never brings you any. In scenarios such as these, someone is directly saying the opposite of their actual actions, which makes it pretty straightforward and easy to see through. But sometimes it's a little more complicated and nuanced, and it can feel more like the right words are just riding on the wrong actions. Because even though what Bartise is saying to Raven is flattering and what is coming out of his mouth is technically very nice, the action that it's riding on is for one that both Bartise and Raven are now in other relationships with their fiancés, both of who are literally present for this moment. And secondly, as also noted by Raven herself, it is only just now that Bartise has seen her that he suddenly has any compliments for her. So even though, again, what he is saying is nice, Raven is aware of the underlying action, and that's the one she's paying attention to. During the same scene, Cole actually does the exact same thing to Colleen, but she eventually responded to this scenario by paying him the compliment back. She probably didn't have any ill intent, she was simply just being polite in her own way, but it did backfire on her, even if I don't think that the events that followed are anywhere near her fault or doing. But even though Raven shut down her situation in a more rejective manner than Colleen did, Raven still stayed polite and graceful through it, instead of getting confrontational or argumentative. Which brings me to my next point, which is that Raven does an amazing job of standing by her values and standards without the need for defending them. Whether it comes down to what is expected of her being a wife-to-come, what type of wedding she will have, or not wanting to compromise on her standard of living in marriage, whatever it is, Raven is perfectly fine and good at communicating her values, but without defending them. Many people feel compelled to defend their standards and boundaries, just as many feel compelled to share their opinions on or attack the decisions of others, both of which are unattractive to most and don't make you happier. It really isn't your job to make sure that other people are happy with your personal values, boundaries, and standards, and always remember that no or that's just how it is are full sentences. And I do want to underline that communicating and defending your standards, of course, aren't the same thing. Communicating them is, of course, important. The next thing about Raven is that she manages to stay reasonable and centered when she is very emotional. Sometimes when we are at the height of our emotions, we can make things worse for ourselves and others and create entirely new problems with our reactions. When SK says no to Raven at the altar, she is understandably very upset, but even then she still finds the capacity to listen to SK's reasonings, be loving about it, and see the bigger picture. This takes a great level of grace and maturity, and this is definitely not an easy achievement for most people. So the next best thing that you can do for others and yourself when you are very emotional and worry that you're not able to have a constructive reaction is to remove yourself from the situation until you are feeling a bit more centered. Of course, this prevents us from creating more of a bigger problem, but on top of that, we will likely also feel much better about ourselves after. In general, Raven tends to have reasonable reactions to her feelings, another example of which is not disclosing whatever issues she has to others, which is something many uses as a way to work through things that can also backfire, especially if the issues you have are regarding another person who's not present when you are talking about them. And a lot of the time, it's better to talk to that person instead. Due to her reasonable nature, Raven was able to work through being rejected at the altar and continue to date SK after the show ended. Whether that was the best thing to do or not is besides the point. That was the personal decision that Raven felt was right at the time. But then, as you probably know, it did come out that SK had been cheating on her through their second engagement, which brings me to another part of Raven's mindset that's very notable, which is that she doesn't let one bad apple shake her core belief. Even after everything and SK's cheating on her, she still knows that she will be okay again and that love is still to be found also after this. If someone has been cheated on, hardly anyone would blame that person for wallowing a bit in their misery, curse the person who cheated on them, and dwell on questions such as how could they. But when we meet Raven after she's been cheated on, she isn't caught up in these types of thoughts at all. She is understandably disappointed, visibly sad and upset, but her thought patterns seem to center around I will be okay. At some point in time after we've been wronged, it is so important to be able to embrace healthier thoughts so that we don't get stuck in the victim mentality of what has been done to us, even when we are perfectly justified in doing so. Our core beliefs determine the thoughts that we have, and the thoughts that we have determines our core beliefs. Being able to see and believe in the good in people is essential to our own future happiness. I hope that you enjoyed this video. For other resources such as coaching for feminine energy in dating or books that I recommend, be sure to check out my description below. Thank you for watching and subscribe to my channel for more.